All right, so continuing my crazy Craigslist chronicles, I just totaled my 1998 Chevy Camaro that I bought on Craigslist. Pretty crazy story. I'll link that video down below so that you can follow along with these stories, so that I can get these old crazy Craigslist chronicles out of the way and potentially relive some new ones now that I'm back in the market and back out there looking at used vehicles. So after totaling my 1998 Chevy Camaro, I was in the market for a new Camaro, another Camaro. I really enjoyed the 1998 Camaro that I had, and I was in the market for another one. Essentially, I got back on Craigslist and started looking, and I found a 1999 pewter Camaro, which is gray, which is kind of like this silver color with the 2019 F250 that we have, but it's a little darker of a color. It's a 1999. It was a pretty popular color back in 1999. Pewter gray T-top Camaro. It had a little damage on the right side fender, and it had some other issues. It was a vehicle that needed an engine, and that was kind of like my niche. 1998 to 2002 Camaro V6s. They were cool because they looked like they had power. They were affordable. The engines were cheap. You can get an engine for like $500 compared to the V8s. Yeah, they were better, but if you had one with a V8, they were a couple grand with a blown motor. If you could find one with a blown motor, the V8s were a bit more reliable, and you just didn't find V8 Camaros that needed engines. The V6s, on the other hand, you could find those all day that needed engines. Then the engines themselves were like $500. So, and they were plentiful because you can get the front wheel drive Buick engines, Pontiac engines. As long as it was a GM 3.8 V6, you could put that engine in that vehicle. So, looking at this whole thing, I ended up finding a 99 Chevy Camaro T-top. It was located in Dearborn. I drove out there to look at it, and of course there were a lot of issues. The vehicle was not what it was said to be, so I was looking for a pretty clean, hopefully only needed the engine. Well, we pulled the dipstick on the transmission, and the trans was fried, totally varnished, never serviced. It was supposed to be red fluid. It was like tar. I don't know how this trans was so smoked, and the trans was slipping. It was slipping real bad. The fluid was cooked, and I knew it needed a trans. But luckily for me, I had a trans because I had a totally wrecked Camaro with a good engine and a good trans. So, it was kind of like whatever. I was still interested after finding it had a bad trans, even though the guy assured me it only needed an engine. Found out it needed a trans as well. So, needless to say, I was able to talk this vehicle down to $500, knowing it needed a transmission. And I had a parts car that was wrecked, so whatever for me. I could put the trans in it as well. Man, when I tell you this was the hardest thing, it was hell. It was automotive hell, putting the engine in this 1998 Chevy Camaro compared to the second Camaro was hell. The first one wasn't so bad. The first one, I put an engine in. I didn't know the history of the transmission, and I just put the engine in it and hope for the best, and boom, the transmission shifted perfect. I got the fluid right. I had to order a dipstick because I couldn't even tell the condition of the transmission, and it was just luck. That car ran perfect. The second one, not so much. The engine was incredibly difficult to get out of the car because the rod came flying out of the side of the block before we could even get the engine out. So it turned from a rod knock to a rod out hanging out of the side of the block. Right when I drove the car into position, it was knocking, and then all of a sudden, boom, rod came out of the side of the engine. So it was hard for me to turn the engine over. It was really hard to get the engine out of the car. So I got the engine out, and I figured it would need a trans because the fluid was so cooked. But I was going to try to see if I could, get that trans to shift okay. And I put the engine in, drove the car around. Trans didn't shift okay at all. It was screwed totally. So after doing the engine, I had to turn around and do the transmission. So I do the transmission, And then I go and drive the car around again, and there's a weird noise coming from it. The rear end shot as well. So I go to my parts car, and boom, I pull the rear end, put the rear end on the car. At this point, I've replaced the entire drive line for the whole car. I put the engine in it, I put the transmission in it, I put the engine in it. Then the interior wasn't right. The interior was all cloth and it was all nasty, so I switched over the whole interior. The front seats, the rear seats, everything that was better on my 98, I put over to my 99. It was an insane amount of work. After doing all that and getting it all done, I drove the car around for a couple of weeks, and then I noticed a slight tapping noise coming from the engine. Whenever it was decelerating, you'd hear, whenever the load came off of the engine, you'd hear a slight knocking noise. Turns out that original engine that was in the wrecked Camaro, the first engine that I bought for the Camaro, developed a rod knock. So after putting an engine in, a transmission in, a rear end, the engine went again on the car. At this point, I was so exhausted. I was so tired. I had to order another engine. And this time I ordered it from eBay. I ordered another engine from eBay. And it came in through the mail. I put this engine in, and boom. This one ran good. But this was crazy. It was winter time. This is how crazy the work ethic was that I had. It was winter time, and the only time off from work that I had to work on the car was when it was snowing. So it's snowing outside and the weather is horrible. I was working down on a slope where the ground was sloped down, and it was like a wet rain. I installed an engine in the rain, in the snowing rain, in a puddle, like underneath the car. It was totally just wet, a puddle. I was soaked, and I installed the engine and became so wet that I was just shivering as I finished the vehicle. And at the time I actually had another vehicle, and there was no heat, there was nothing like that. I was pretty much outside, so I had to leave my other vehicle, my 92 Infiniti, running with the heat blasting while I worked soaked in the rain. And then after getting the engine in, shivering, had to strip down naked inside the Infiniti with the heat blasting so I wouldn't freeze. It was crazy. I had so much work ethic. And, you know, $500 car, $500 engine, a whole parts car, a different transmission, the rear end. I put a new rear end on it, the rear end from the wrecked Camaro on it, some brakes. Ended up getting, you know, ball joints, alignment, and boom, I was back in business. I had a running car again, but the fender ended up being a different color. You know, it was cracked, so I ended up putting a black fender on it. Ended up having to put another bumper on it, so I had a pewter car with a black fender and a black bumper, but it ran good. And man, I drove that car for so many years after that. So many years. I mean, I drove that car until I started at Ford, and I still had the Infiniti, and I had that car. I had all my tools in the back of the Infiniti, and that's what I drove when I started at Ford. And I would switch up between the Infiniti and the 99 Camaro. And fun fact, 1999 was a good year to buy a Camaro. If I might even buy another one just to relive my youth. But the 99 Camaro was a good year because they switched everything to electronic, something that Ford, you know, didn't even do for their EcoBoost until 2017, that is. Everything was electronic. The throttle body, electronic. The EGR, electronic. Everything was electronically controlled. Pretty advanced stuff. Versus the 98, everything was more mechanical. In 99, they really stepped up. So if you're looking at old Camaros, 99 would be a good year to get into because everything's electronic and everything was a little bit better. But man, that was just the crazy things I used to do back in the day, working on these old cars. I drove that Camaro till it had like 220,000 miles. Ended up selling it for like $1,300. So I sold it for more money than I paid for it after putting a ton of miles on it. Crazy things. And I sold it on Craigslist. Crazy situation. That vehicle continued to run because I saw it in the neighborhood for the next couple years. and it continued to ran. But it was weird. One day, the engine came loose in the car because I hardly put enough bolts to. I put just enough bolts in the engine just to keep it together. But a few years later, it came loose and developed this weird vibration. And after really looking at it, all the bolts came loose except for like one, and I had to retighten up all the bolts between the engine and the transmission. Crazy story. But that car took me so far. It took me to Cedar Point so many times. It drove me to Ford, drove me to all the different meetings that were required for me to go to Ford, all over this. I didn't travel too far, but back and forth to Ohio to different amusement parks. But man, what a fun time that was. Just Donna was along with me for the ride. All these Camaros. The second one, she rode in it quite a bit. Crazy stories. But that's it for today for the Craigslist Chronicles. There are more. There are a few more crazy stories. Some are crazier. Like, for example, when I bought a wrecked Infiniti for a parts car. That'll be the next video that we will do in the series. And that is it for today. So thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye.